Han Sankian spent 3 years as the punchline of every joke in Yuncheng. He married into the powerful Su family, a major name in the construction business, as a nobody chasing a better life, but ended up becoming the so-called bronze trophy husband of the most desired woman in town, the beautiful Su. The marriage had been a strange arrangement made by the late family patriarch, a secret he took to the grave just 2 months after the wedding, leaving Han alone in a den of snakes. That night, the atmosphere was tense. Han arrived late to Grandma's birthday party, the matriarch of the clan, trying to smooth out his wrinkled suit while facing his wife's impatient stare at the entrance. Su didn't bother hiding her irritation, questioning his delay and his lack of preparation when it came to the old woman's gift. Before stepping into the hall, she gave him a blunt warning. No matter how badly they were humiliated inside, he needed to keep his mouth shut and take it. The moment they walked into the event, the barrage began. The traffic excuse didn't work. Su's uncle was the first to strike, demanding respect for such an important date and exposing the couple's failure in front of everyone. While Su tried to force an awkward smile and apologize for the negligence, the room filled with sharp gossip. The main target was Han, the directionless guy, the so-called house husband, living off his wife and spending his days doing laundry while everyone else made money. He was the outsider, and the Su family made sure he felt exactly that way. Things got even heavier when Su Haichao, the arrogant cousin, decided to turn Han Sankian's gift into a public joke. In front of everyone, Han tried to keep his composure, saying he had chosen the present carefully, but Haichao showed no mercy. With a smug grin, he started mocking the simplicity of the package, reminding everyone that the matriarch was turning 80 and that thing was an insult. To finish the humiliation, the cousin pointed to a pile of luxury gifts and pulled out his trump card, an extremely rare tea worth 880,000 wen. The entire room was stunned by the price. When Su Yingxia tried to step in, asking her cousin to stop showing off, Haichao doubled down. He called Han trash and claimed that being humble around such a loser was a waste of time. He went even further, attacking Yingxia herself, saying that living with a worthless bum had made her lose all sense of value and dignity. Han Sankian listened to everything in silence, swallowing the poison to avoid causing a scene for his wife until he finally decided to act. He picked up Haichao's expensive gift and took a deep sniff. With a sharp look, he calmly said that something about it didn't smell right. Furious, the cousin snatched the package from his hands, forbidding the starving nobody from touching something so valuable. With a sarcastic smile, Han apologized, but then dropped the bomb. He explained that he understood how aged tea grading worked and that many shady sellers used artificial drying tricks to make products look older and jack up the price. Haichao, feeling the hit, tried to brush it off, but the seed of doubt had already been planted in the middle of the party. The mood at the celebration turned sour. Han Sankian didn't back down and began giving an impromptu lesson about tea, explaining that the dark green color of that pour cake exposed the fraud. It was a raw product packed with caffeine and dangerous for an elderly woman's stomach. He cornered his cousin, questioning whether he really had the nerve to give something low quality to his own grandmother. Pressured and fuming with rage, Haichao made a careless mistake. He shouted that Han was lying, blurting out that Grandma hadn't even been drinking tea for the past 2 years, so there was no risk anyway. Han delivered the checkmate. If he knew she didn't drink tea anymore, then he bought a fake gift precisely because he assumed no one would ever test the taste. The room turned into a buzzing hive of gossip, with relatives split between doubt and mockery. Even Han's wife, Yingxia, grew tense, grabbing his arm to ask if he was really sure about what he was saying. Han simply asked her to stay calm, trusting what he had learned. The commotion stopped when the matriarch finally appeared. Yingxia wasted no time and told her about the suspicion of forgery. Haichao panicked, begging the old woman not to listen to the family's trash. Grandma picked up the tea cake, examined the product in silence for a few seconds, and delivered her verdict. The gift was legitimate. The humiliation instantly shifted sides. Haichao puffed his chest back out while the crowd piled onto Han, calling him an envious insect who knew nothing about luxury. The matriarch, with a stern glare, demanded an explanation for why he was slandering his cousin. Even with the entire room against him, Han Sankian refused to bow his head and made one final request, that she look at the tea cake one more time, but this time up close. The humiliation reached its peak with a sharp crack. Yingxia slapped Han Sankian across the face in front of everyone. Desperate to end the embarrassment, she ordered him to bow and apologize immediately. Under the relatives' mocking laughter, Han swallowed his pride, lowered his head, and apologized to his cousin. Victorious, Haichao leaned in and whispered that the truth didn't matter. Even if the tea were garbage, Grandma would always protect her blood grandson over an insignificant son-in-law. Shortly afterward, alone, Yingjia confronted her husband. Bitter and frustrated, she told him he could return the slap whenever he wanted, but Han, staying calm, thanked her instead. He knew her blow had been a shield to prevent a harsher punishment from the matriarch. When he asked whether she wanted him to change for her, the answer came like a bucket of cold water. To change, you need capital. And in that family's hierarchy, a so-called useless man would never have a voice. At that moment, something snapped in Han Sang-kyan's mind. He decided he would show that blind clan what real financial power truly meant. Dinner continued with toasts and shallow conversations until a messenger suddenly interrupted the banquet. Annoyed by the audacity, Grandma demanded to know who dared invade her party. The man announced that he was there to deliver luxury gifts on behalf of the mysterious Han family. The list was surreal. It started with a golden phoenix-shaped comb, followed by other items of astronomical value. While the guests stood there stunned, and some tried to joke to hide their envy, Han Sang-kyan watched everything in silence, his expression cold. Noticing the tension in her husband and the coincidence of the last name, Yingjia asked the question that would change everything. Was he part of that family? The shock was absolute when the messenger announced the final item on the list, 888 million yuan in cash. The entire hall froze. The matriarch, her eyes shining with greed, immediately realized that this wasn't just a simple gift, but a luxurious engagement dowry meant for one of the young women of the Su family. When asked which Han heir he represented, the messenger remained mysterious. He said he was only the delivery man, and then walked away, leaving the mystery hanging in the air. Arrogance changed hands. Yingxia's cousins began competing for the spot of favorite, with Su Yiran bragging that she was the prettiest and the most likely choice. Haiqiao took the opportunity to rub it in once again, laughing right in Yingxia's face. He mocked her, saying that everyone had a chance except the so-called number one beauty of the city, since she had ruined her own fate by marrying trash like Han Sang-kyan. Yingxia finally reached her limit. She slammed her hand on the table and demanded silence, only to be interrupted by Grandma, who promised to hold on to the money until the mysterious suitor revealed himself. The night ended in war inside Yingxia's house. Her mother, Jiang Lan, went into full meltdown, screaming that the party had been a nightmare and blaming her husband for being blind enough to let their daughter marry Han. In her eyes, the useless son-in-law had destroyed any chance of inheritance by offending the matriarch. Shouting at the top of her lungs, she demanded an immediate divorce, while Yingxia's father tried unsuccessfully to calm everyone down. Standing outside the door, Han Sang-kyan heard every word, but what truly froze him was his wife's response. Yingxia stood up to her mother and made it crystal clear there would be no divorce. Even under pressure and being called crazy for choosing a failure, she defended Han, reminding everyone that, despite not having money, he was the only one who took care of everything and worked tirelessly for the household over the past few years. The tension inside the room exploded into a heartfelt outburst. With her voice trembling, Yingxia made it clear to her parents that, although Han's lack of ambition frustrated her, she had never hated him. She reminded them that while everyone else kicked him around, he was the one holding the household together without ever complaining. She also laid out the harsh truth. The matriarch would never allow a divorce now because the reputation of the Su family mattered more than anyone's happiness. In the hallway, listening to everything, Han Sang-kyan felt the weight of his wife's sacrifice and decided it was time to end the charade. The reckoning with the past came the very next morning. Han came face to face with the woman who had abandoned him, his own mother. There were no hugs, only ice-cold tension. She came with a story of regret, saying the Han family needed him because his father was sick and his perfect brother, everyone's favorite, had been thrown behind bars. Now that the golden heir was rotting in prison, the rejected one had suddenly become indispensable. Han Sang-kyan didn't buy the excuse. With a piercing stare, he unleashed 3 years of bottled-up resentment. He reminded her that since childhood, he had done everything possible to be noticed. Yet he was always overshadowed by a manipulative brother who wore the mask of a good son. Their grandmother, afraid that Han's talent might threaten the favorite's throne, had kicked him out onto the streets like garbage. He went straight to the point. If his brother hadn't been arrested, would they even remember he existed? If the bloodline weren't at risk, would he still be treated like a ghost? Faced with his mother's guilty silence, Han delivered his final verdict. He declared that neither his grandmother nor his mother deserved the titles they carried. He was no longer a pawn in their game. He was the only one left capable of saving the empire that had once cast him aside. Han Sang-kyan wasn't there to play games. He accepted the burden of saving the empire, but with one condition that left his mother speechless. He would set the rules. Without hesitation, she handed him the key to the kingdom, an access card to a brand new billion-dollar company founded by the Han matriarch in the city, now placed entirely under his command. He knew it was his grandmother's final test, her last doubt about his capability, and he decided that not only would he pass the test, but he would take back, dollar by dollar, everything that had been stolen from him during 3 years of humiliation. 3 days later, China's financial market shook. The rumor of a real estate storm proved to be true. The powerful Han family, a giant in the industry, had planted its flag in the city. They arrived aggressively, buying up every empty lot to build a brand new luxury district. Inside the Su family's mansions, the atmosphere turned into pure frenzy. The women of the clan connected the dots, remembering the massive dowry delivered just days earlier, and jealousy began to spill over. Yuran, convinced she was the chosen one, didn't miss the chance to take another jab at Yingxia, saying she felt sorry for someone stuck with a useless piece of trash while the rest of the family leveled up. The mockery only stopped when Grandma demanded order. The goal was clear. As a construction materials company, the Su family desperately needed a contract with the new Han industry giant. The problem was the wall in front of them. Haichao and his father, Su Guolin, admitted their failure. Every representative the family had sent was turned away at the door. No one could even get a glimpse of the new CEO. The matriarch, furious at the incompetence of her favorites, exploded in anger, demanding an immediate solution so they wouldn't lose the golden opportunity. Little did they know that the so-called untouchable boss was the same man they ordered to wash dishes every morning. Grandma refused to accept excuses. The order was simple. If the new industry giant still didn't have an official partner, the Su family would swallow their pride and wait at the company's entrance, taking turns standing guard until the boss showed up. The family's high-ranking members found the idea humiliating, and that was when Haichao saw his chance to dump the problem on Yingxia. He suggested that since she seemed so calm, she should be the first one in line. The room turned into a chorus of pressure. Relatives said she needed to justify the food she ate and make up for the expenses she brought to the family. While Yingxia hesitated, cornered, her phone suddenly vibrated. An anonymous message told her not to back down and to embrace the opportunity. With no way out and choosing to trust that mysterious encouragement, she accepted the challenge. The provocation escalated even further. Haichao's father mocked her, saying that if she failed again, there would be no reason to keep her in the clan. Yingxia felt her blood boil. She knew the worst tasks were always dumped on her, but she faced the challenge head-on, promising she would handle it on her own. The mockery spread across the room. Haichao even proposed a bet. If she secured the contract, he would personally serve her tea. If she failed, she would be kicked out of the Su family forever. She accepted the deal and walked out of that den of snakes. Outside, Han Sang-kyan was waiting for his wife, just like he had done for years. An acquaintance approached him, offered a cigarette, and commented on his dedication to waiting for her every single day, joking that Han was more punctual than the company's own employees. The man, noticing that Han didn't seem like an ordinary person, finally asked the question many people wondered in silence. Why would a guy like him accept joining a family like the Su clan? Han Sang-kyan wasn't bothered by the man's curiosity on the sidewalk. With a slight smile, he commented that his reputation as the patient husband must have spread around the area by now. The young man tried to apologize, but admitted he couldn't understand how someone could endure so much humiliation for years. Han's response was straightforward. What he went through didn't even come close to the weight his strong and hardworking wife carried on her shoulders because of him. When he walked into the house, the scene was pure chaos. Zhang Lan, the mother-in-law, was having a complete meltdown. She shouted that Yingxia had fallen straight into Haichao's trap, that he only wanted an excuse to kick them out of the family and grab a bigger slice of the inheritance. Desperation filled the living room. To them, being expelled meant total ruin. When Han tried to step in, asking them to trust Yingxia's talent to close the deal, he was drowned out by insults. His mother-in-law called him a piece of trash and ordered him to shut up, saying a useless man had no right to an opinion. Exhausted from all the yelling, Yingxia stood up and walked into the kitchen, where Han was preparing dinner. She looked at him seriously and asked if he had spent the day hiding again, secretly watching her leave work. Caught red-handed, he admitted it. Then came the surprise. She told him that from now on, he didn't need to hide anymore. She wanted him to wait for her at the company entrance every single day so they could go home together, like a real married couple. The shock was so intense that Han almost burned the food. While his mother-in-law kept yelling from the living room about the smell of something burning, Han hugged his wife and whispered a promise. She didn't need to fear the new real estate giant. He revealed that the big boss of that company was actually an old-school friend of his. Meanwhile, at the Su family's office, the mood was one of premature celebration. Haichao couldn't stop laughing, telling everyone that the naive Yingxia had fallen for the trick and was about to get kicked out of the family. He could hardly wait to see his cousin humiliated at the reception desk of a company that, according to him, would never open its doors to someone like her. While the Su family laughed behind Yingxia's back, convinced she was walking straight into her own downfall, Haichao was already planning his next move. He confessed to Yiran that even if a miracle somehow happened, he had a backup plan to make sure she and Han Sanqian would be wiped out of the family once and for all. To him, it was only a matter of time before the trash got thrown out. The next morning, reality told a different story. Han stopped his motorcycle in front of the towering Han Industries building. Yingxia looked pale, her hands trembling with anxiety, but Han locked eyes with her and assured her that with her talent, the contract was already hers. Taking a deep breath for courage, she walked through the glass doors. The shock came right at the reception. Before she even opened her mouth to introduce herself, the receptionist smiled and said that Manager Zhang was already expecting her. As she walked across the lobby, a red carpet was rolled out beneath her feet under the curious gaze of the employees. The welcome was fit for a queen, not a construction material saleswoman. Manager Zhang, the man in charge of the entire operation, wasted no time on bureaucracy. He placed the contract on the table and told her she could sign it right then and there. Yingxia froze. She asked if it was some kind of prank since they hadn't even started negotiating prices or deadlines. With complete seriousness, Zhang explained that the company had conducted a full background review of her track record and trusted her abilities without hesitation. He extended his hand, sealing the partnership and declaring that the future of the new district was now in her hands. Outside, Han Sanqian's phone vibrated with a short, direct notification. "Young master, the contract has been signed." With a subtle smile, he slipped the phone back into his pocket, knowing that the game had officially changed hands. Han Sanqian smiled quietly when he saw his wife walk out of the building glowing with excitement. He pretended to be surprised, asking if the deal had gone through, and Yingxia nearly burst with joy. The contract was a complete success. A champagne celebration was already on their minds, but her phone suddenly buzzed with an emergency summons from the Su family. When they arrived at the meeting, the atmosphere felt like a funeral for their rivals. Haichao, wearing a smug little grin, asked if she had already packed her bags to leave the family. Her answer hit like a punch. Yingxia confirmed that the deal with the real estate giant had been finalized. Grandma nearly fell out of her chair in shock, and the contract was passed around from hand to hand under everyone's stunned stares. Desperate to sabotage the moment, Haichao shouted that the document was fake and that a useless woman could never achieve something like that. Yingxia stood her ground and demanded that he honor the bet. With no way out and pressured by the matriarch herself, who valued the family's word above all, the cousin had to swallow his pride, bow down, and serve her tea in front of everyone. The victory seemed complete. Back at home, Yingxia's parents suddenly changed their tune. Her mother now bragged that her daughter's talent came purely from good genetics, completely ignoring any role Han Sanqian had played in the process. But the happiness didn't last long. The phone rang. It was Grandma speaking in a cold voice, announcing that leadership of the project had just been transferred into Haichao's hands. Han Sanqian, who had been listening nearby, felt his blood boil. He knew the Su family's betrayal would not come cheap. Grandma's move hit like a bucket of ice water. The moment she hung up on Yingxia, she made it clear to Haichao that she wasn't naive. She knew he was acting out of pure jealousy and greed, even reminding him of the fiasco with the fake tea. Still, the cousin groveled and swore loyalty, using a sexist argument that putting power in Yingxia's hands was the same as handing the Su family's inheritance over to Han Sanqian, the so-called trash. The matriarch, prioritizing bloodline and family name above fairness, gave in to the dirty game. Inside the bedroom, the mood felt like mourning. Yingxia cried quietly, saying she should already be used to being stabbed in the back by her own family. Han Sanqian, however, refused to accept defeat. He comforted his wife with a cold promise. No one would take that position away from her. While she tried to rest, he stepped outside and made a single phone call to Manager Zhang. The instruction was short and absolute. The project would only exist if Yingxia remained in charge. The next day, Hai Chao showed up at the headquarters of Han Industries puffing out his chest, ready to claim the throne. He reached out to shake Zhang's hand with a rehearsed smile, but was completely ignored. When he tried to introduce himself as the new person in charge, claiming that Yingxia was sick, the manager didn't even blink. Zhang immediately turned his back on him, stating that they would only resume talks once Miss Su had recovered. Desperate, Hai Chao chased after him, trying to sell himself as a negotiator far superior to his cousin. Zhang stopped, looked at him with open contempt, and dropped the bombshell. There were lines of companies waiting for that partnership, and given the Su family's hypocrisy, he was now reconsidering the entire contract. The manager walked away without looking back, leaving Hai Chao on his knees, panicking. When Grandma heard about the disaster, she went into shock. The dream of fortune was slipping through her fingers because of the incompetence of her favorite grandson. The Su household collapsed into chaos. Grandma, terrified, demanded to know what Hai Chao had done to scare off the investor. He tried to defend himself, insisting that he hadn't said a single offensive word and that manager Zhang had simply walked away when he didn't see Yingxia. The matriarch stayed realistic. Going head-to-head with the Han family empire was financial suicide. She gave her grandson an ultimatum. Either he fixed the mess he created or he would face the consequences. Yingxia's phone wouldn't stop ringing. This time, Han Senqian answered it. On the other end, Hai Chao sounded completely broken, begging to speak with his cousin. Han, in the calmest voice imaginable, simply informed him that she was sick and unable to take the call, then hung up in his face. Furious, Hai Chao smashed his phone on the ground and stormed off, heading straight to Han's house ready for a physical confrontation. The encounter exploded instantly. The moment he stepped inside, Hai Chao swung a punch at Han Senqian, demanding answers for his arrogance. But Han was no longer the same fool from before. He dodged the attack with ease and fired back with a precise kick, knocking his cousin flat onto the floor. When Yingxia rushed in, startled by the noise, Han simply smiled and said it was nothing, just an unexpected visit. Lying on the ground and groaning in pain, Hai Chao still tried to threaten Han, asking if he had any idea who he was messing with. Han's expression turned cold as he adopted an authoritative posture no one had ever seen before, delivering a clear message. If Grandma had decided to replace Yingxia, then Grandma herself should come in person to fix the problem, not send a lackey. Before the blonde cousin could protest, Han slammed the door in his face. Inside, Yingxia stood there in shock. Han explained the situation. The investor had made it clear that he would only do business with her and no one else. That was why Hai Chao had come crawling back, begging for her return. She asked whether Han truly believed the family matriarch would personally show up to apologize. Han simply gave an enigmatic smile, radiating the quiet confidence of someone who had already won the game. Han Senqian remained absolutely certain the matriarch would swallow her pride and show up at their door. In the living room, the atmosphere felt like a battlefield. Yingxia's mother was losing control, screaming that Han was condemning the family to poverty by demanding such humiliation from Grandma. She demanded an immediate divorce, but for the first time, Yingxia stepped forward like a shield in front of her husband, ordering her mother to stop the attacks. Later, alone in the bedroom, the mood shifted. Han thanked her for the support, but Yingxia was confused. She couldn't understand how he managed to smile and endure so much contempt, especially knowing that his connection with that wealthy friend was what secured the contract. With an intense gaze, Han confessed that nothing he suffered compared to the humiliation she had endured for years by standing beside him. Left speechless and visibly moved, she simply told him to get some rest. At dawn, the game of hide-and-seek finally ended. Yingxia caught Han pretending to sleep and gave him a direct order. From that day forward, he would run beside her, no more hiding. Han was surprised to realize that she had always known he secretly followed her from a distance during her morning runs. They stopped in front of a cinematic-looking mansion, the place of Yingxia's dreams. Han asked if she wanted to live there, but she laughed, thinking it was a bad joke. She explained that the property cost at least 60 million yuan, and that even Grandma dreamed of owning it, but didn't have the financial power to buy it. To her, living there was pure fantasy, and she quickly went back to running, leaving Han behind. Alone, Han Senqian's demeanor changed completely. In a quick phone call to his manager, he gave a direct order: purchase the villa immediately. The employee hesitated, reminding him that the Han family's funds had strict usage rules, but Han was determined to turn his wife's impossible dream into a signed deed. The manager hesitated again, pointing out that company funds were reserved strictly for investments, but Han Senqian cut him off by handing over his personal black card. The employee nearly collapsed when he realized the level of wealth possessed by the so-called useless son-in-law. In that moment, the truth finally surfaced. Han revealed that the wealthy friend, Kin Lin, was merely a front man. In reality, Han Sanqian had built his own empire in secret since the age of 12. The company's name, Feng, was a visual code. All it took was a single vertical stroke added to the Han family character to create it. The manager, now in total shock, swore absolute secrecy while receiving the order to buy the 60 million yuan mansion, no matter the cost. For Han, nothing was too expensive when it came to fulfilling Yingxia's dream. The very next day, the intercom rang inside the family's modest apartment. Yingxia's father nearly had a heart attack when he opened the door. It was Grandma herself complaining about the broken elevator and the simple living conditions. Jiang Lan, the mother-in-law, instantly switched into extreme flattery mode, trying to hide the truth. She blatantly lied, claiming that Yingxia was locked inside her room so she wouldn't infect anyone with her illness. The charade didn't last long. Han Sanqian walked into the living room holding a cup of tea and, with the calmest expression imaginable, exposed his mother-in-law's lie right in front of the matriarch. He stated plainly that Yingxia wasn't sick at all. While Jiang Lan boiled with rage, ready to jump at her son-in-law's throat for ruining the plan, Grandma narrowed her eyes. She demanded to know exactly what Han meant by that, realizing that the game of appearances was over, and that she would have to face reality if she didn't want to lose the multi-million-dollar contract. Han Sanqian didn't back down. Looking the matriarch straight in the eye, he laid it out bluntly. Grandma was smart enough to understand that the contract with the real estate giant only existed because of Yingxia. He pointed out that taking the project away from her had been a massive mistake, and that Hai Chao was nothing more than an incompetent opportunist. The room went ice cold. Han's in-laws nearly fainted in terror, scrambling to apologize for their son-in-law's boldness, but Han stood his ground. He challenged the old woman, stating that if she insisted on clinging to her pride, the Su family would suffer a financial loss they would never recover from. Grandma, visibly irritated, asked if he wasn't afraid of provoking her and whether he really believed she wouldn't have the courage to cancel everything. Han, wearing the confident smile of someone holding all the cards, replied that she was free to choose the abyss. His goal was simple. Yingxia would finally receive the respect and value she deserved within that clan. At the peak of the standoff, Han's phone rang. It was Yingxia. She announced that manager Zhang had just officially confirmed the partnership would resume the following Monday. Han seized the moment and handed the phone to Grandma. With no way out, the matriarch had to change her tone, thanking her granddaughter for her hard work and inviting her to a celebration dinner over the weekend. Before leaving, the old woman delivered a bitter warning to Han. He should never dare to covet the Su family's wealth. His reply was short and blunt. He had absolutely no interest in such a small fortune. The celebration dinner was marked by a sudden shift in the winds. Grandma, who had once ignored her granddaughter, now praised her in front of the entire family. She announced that from that moment on, Yingxia would not only remain in charge of the project, but would also become a key figure in the company's future. While the cousins burned with jealousy, Han Sanqian watched from a distance, knowing that this was only the first step toward placing the world at his wife's feet. The crowning moment of Su Yingxia became the main event of the banquet. In front of the entire clan, Grandma declared that she would be the sole leader of the West City project, the biggest undertaking in the family's history. While Yingxia shined, poison spread quietly through the corners of the room. Hai Chao was practically tearing his suit apart with envy, and the cousins whispered dirty rumors, suggesting she had only secured the contract after pleasing manager Zhang in private. After the toasts, the matriarch pulled her granddaughter aside. Speaking in a warning tone, the old woman admitted that the marriage seemed to be going well, but advised Yingxia to sleep with one eye open. In her view, Han Sanqian was still an outsider interested in the Su family's inheritance and should be kept far away from financial secrets. Yingxia listened in silence, finding it ironic that her grandmother had no idea that the very outsider she distrusted was the one who had saved the family. The conversation was interrupted by explosive news that spread across the hall. The highly coveted mountain mansion had finally been sold. The price? 100 million yuan. Grandma turned pale. Not even she, with all her accumulated wealth, would have dared to spend that kind of fortune on a single residence. Nearby, Han Sanqian nudged his wife and commented with a subtle smirk that her dream house already had a new owner. Curious, Yingxia wondered what kind of billionaire could spend that much money without blinking. Han suggested that for the buyer, that amount might feel like pocket change. She fired back, joking that if it were a dowry for a new bride, the chosen one would surely be the beautiful Yiran, who always attracted the spotlight. Han stopped, looked straight into Yingxia's eyes, and told her she was infinitely more beautiful than her cousin. She laughed bitterly, reminding him that as a married woman, she would never be the target of such a powerful suitor. What she didn't know was that the owner of the mansion was standing right beside her, sharing the same roof and listening to her doubts. Yingxia noticed that Han Sanqian had been wearing the same suit for far too long and decided to take him shopping. He happily accepted the invitation on the spot, joking that he was ready to carry as many shopping bags as needed and that this time he would be the one paying, even though she insisted on treating him to the gift. The mood turned tense when they ran into one of Yingxia's old friends at the store. The woman, dripping with prejudice, began spewing venom, humiliating Han for not owning a car and for getting around on a cheap electric scooter. She pressured Yingxia, questioning how she could tolerate a man with no value. Yingxia, however, shut the conversation down, firmly stating that she was doing her best to make her marriage work. Unwilling to accept that, and convinced of her own irresistible charm, the so-called friend decided to stage a loyalty test to expose Han. She started trying on bold, revealing dresses, drawing his attention and showing off, certain he would fall into her trap. While every other man in the store stared in awe, Han Sanqian barely glanced her way. For every seductive pose and every question about how she looked, he responded with a dry, indifferent, "Looks fine," immediately turning his attention back to his wife. The woman escalated the game, trying on increasingly provocative outfits, but Han's reaction never changed. Total indifference. She became furious. No one had ever been so unmoved by her beauty. The tables turned completely when Yingxia stepped out of the fitting room wearing an elegant dress. What the homewrecker failed to achieve with all her effort, Yingxia accomplished simply by existing. Han was completely stunned, praising his wife's beauty while ignoring the other woman as if she were invisible. The situation inside the luxury store quickly turned into a battlefield. A snobbish customer snatched the dress out of Yingxia's hands, declaring that designer clothes turned into garbage when worn by poor people. Instead of stepping in, the sales clerk humiliated Yingxia even further, suggesting she go look for something in the discount section. Han Sanqian's blood boiled. He confronted the employee, asking whether the rule there was to give priority to whoever spent the most money. When he heard confirmation that the biggest spender called the shots, Han dropped the bombshell. He would buy the entire store's inventory. The mockery spread instantly. The wealthy customers and the saleswoman burst into laughter. Convinced it was nothing more than a bluff from a starving nobody, Han stepped forward to pay, only to realize he had left his card with Manager Zhang during the mansion purchase. Asking for just a minute to make a call, he became the target of even harsher jokes. Even Yingxia's so-called friend tried to slip away quietly to avoid further embarrassment, but Yingxia, though confused, chose to trust her husband, sensing that he wasn't joking. The humiliation lasted exactly 1 minute. Suddenly, a luxury car screeched to a halt at the entrance, drawing every eye in the store. The saleswoman rushed over to flatter the newcomer, only to be completely ignored. Manager Zhang walked straight across the showroom, bowed deeply in front of Han Sanqian, and personally handed the card back to him, apologizing for the delay. The silence inside the store became deafening. With the card back in his hand, Han simply smiled at the cashier and ordered them to finalize the purchase of everything. The game was over, and the mockers had nowhere left to hide their faces. The saleswoman and the flashy rich customers froze when the payment of 400,000 yuan went through without a single beep of hesitation from the machine. What had been laughter moments earlier turned into a funeral-like silence. Yingxia, trembling slightly, entered the password Han whispered, their wedding date, feeling the weight of a gesture worth more than any piece of jewelry. The jealous friend nearly exploded, accusing the couple of staging the entire scene just to humiliate her. As the snobs quietly slipped away, the man who had confronted Han earlier suddenly realized the gravity of his mistake. He recognized Manager Zhang as the man who had purchased the 100 million yuan mansion and understood that Han Sanqian was not an ordinary man, but someone dangerous to investigate. Before leaving, Han delivered the final blow. He suggested to the store manager that certain employees, pointing directly at the arrogant saleswoman, were bad for business. The result was immediate: termination on the spot. Later that day, the mood at home turned strange. Yingxia received a frantic video from her friend, who swore she had found the man of her dreams. It was a recording of a mysterious pianist playing with flawless technique. As Yingxia studied the video, a chill ran down her spine. The profile, the hands, and the posture of that musician felt far too familiar. It was Han Sanqian. That same afternoon, after the whirlwind of shopping, Yingxia asked Han to wait at the entrance of the mall while she went to the restroom. Alone, Han watched the flow of people, thinking that the new clothes were already on their way to the new house. He reflected that with so many bags and a new life beginning, an electric scooter would no longer be enough. It was time to upgrade the garage as well. A wave of nostalgia hit when Han Sanqian spotted a lonely piano in the mall's central plaza. The instrument, though well-maintained, seemed to be begging for notes that hadn't been played in a long time. For Han, the piano had always been his childhood refuge, the place he ran to release his pain and loneliness after enduring humiliation from his own family. Driven by curiosity to see whether his fingers still carried their old agility, he sat down and let the music flow. The effect was immediate. The plaza came to a standstill. Han's talent was so extraordinary that it seemed to hypnotize everyone passing by, drawing eyes and cameras from all directions. Within minutes, a crowd of enchanted girls surrounded the instrument, forcing Han to stop abruptly and slip away quietly, dying of embarrassment from the sudden attention. On his way out, he nearly bumped into Yingxia's friend, who stood there in a trance recording the scene, not even realizing that the man of her dreams was the very same person she had mocked so mercilessly. Soon after, Yingxia returned with a shy expression, hiding something behind her back. With flushed cheeks, she handed Han a gift, a vibrant, sophisticated red suit. She confessed, a bit awkwardly, that his old look had become too worn out, and that she wanted to see him wearing something that matched the new chapter of their lives. Genuinely touched, Han had not expected such a caring gesture and hurried off to try it on. As she watched him from behind while he adjusted the new suit, a sudden realization struck Yingxia. His silhouette, posture, and movements were an exact match for the pianist who had just gone viral online. Unable to hold back, she blurted out the question, did he know how to play the piano? Han let out a nervous laugh, pretending complete ignorance and asking if she was joking. He quickly changed the subject, showing off the new suit and asking for her opinion. Yingxia smiled and said he looked great, but the suspicion about her husband's hidden talent only grew stronger. The red suit fit him perfectly. Han Sanqian strutted in front of his wife, assuring her that her taste was flawless. Yingxia, satisfied but exhausted, ended the night by reminding him that the heavy work on the new project would begin early the next morning. At the office, the atmosphere was pure obsession. Lingi practically melted over her desk, hypnotized by the video of the mysterious pianist. To her, that Greek god was perfection in musical form. Yingxia tried to bring her back to reality, arguing that the video only showed the man's back and that it wasn't such a big deal. When Yingxia dared to say that the musician's build looked a lot like Han Sanqian's, Lingi nearly fell out of her chair laughing. In her mind, someone like that had to be born into wealth and luxury cars, never an old electric scooter falling apart. While the two women joked, Han Sanqian parked his scooter in front of a high-end dealership. Inside, the salespeople exchanged looks of disdain. No one wanted to waste time helping the scooter guy, assuming he didn't have a single dollar in his pocket. The game changed the moment Han stopped in front of a gleaming Audi A8. As he touched the car's body, he was immediately surrounded by employees who warned him that he wouldn't have enough money to cover the paint job if he scratched it. Without saying a word, Han pulled out his card with a faint smile. The shock was instant. Within seconds, the same people who had insulted him were now bending over backward, offering hot coffee, cold drinks, and every possible courtesy. Han casually picked one salesperson at random to receive the commission, ignoring the late flattery. Shortly afterward, the roar of the new engine echoed in front of the cafe he frequented. Han stepped out with a wide grin, greeting the owner with an energetic good morning. The old man, who always had a sharp eye, remarked that he had known all along Han was no ordinary man and that the dragon had finally decided to fly again. Han simply brushed it off, savoring the feeling of being, for the first time in years, in control of his own destiny. Han Sanqian didn't brag about his bank account, but he made a point of showing off what truly mattered. At the snack bar, he puffed out his chest to show off his new suit, proudly explaining that it was a gift from Yingxia. The owner of the place, playing along, showed the embroidery on his own uniform made by his wife, proving that for them, value was measured in affection, not price. The playful husband competition only ended when the owner's wife stepped in and shut down the conversation, ordering her husband back to work amid laughter. The real surprise came at the end of the workday. Yingxia froze when she saw Han leaning casually against a brand new Audi A8. The shock was immediate. She demanded to know where so much money had suddenly come from. Han, completely unfazed, simply said he bought it with his savings. Before she could process the answer, Haichao showed up, dripping with sarcasm. He mocked that Yingxia had barely taken charge of the project and was already diverting funds for luxury, leaving a veiled threat hanging in the air before walking away. At home, the interrogation continued. Han's in-laws closed in on their daughter, accusing her of hiding money from grandma just to show off. Yingxia denied it desperately, but her mother, Jiang Lan, wouldn't listen. She snatched the key from Han's hand and ran straight to the garage. The moment she saw the shine of the Audi, her tone changed instantly. She declared that Yingxia was foolish for letting such an expensive car stay in Han's hands because he would surely use it to cheat on her. In a bold move, Jiang Lan confiscated the Audi for her own use, tossing the keys to her old Toyota at the couple. Yingxia was furious at the injustice, but Han gently held her arm with a calm smile. He assured her there was no problem and that he would handle the situation. The very next day, there was Han Sanqian parking the beat-up Toyota in front of the cafe, proving that for him, what mattered was who stood beside him, not the metal beneath his feet. The routine at the cafe changed quickly. The owner couldn't understand why Han Sanqian had returned driving the same old Toyota again, but Han simply smiled and headed straight to the dealership. As soon as he arrived, the salesman rushed over to return the electric scooter, but Han told him to keep it. Without wasting a second, he pointed toward the showroom and calmly announced that he needed another Audi A8. Yingxia's expression when she left work was priceless. She knew her mother hadn't returned the first car, so how had he shown up with another identical one? Han tried the most ridiculous excuse imaginable, claiming it was a buy one, get one free promotion. Yingxia didn't fall for it and delivered a checkmate response, saying she didn't care how much money he had in the bank. But as his wife, she demanded honesty and zero secrets from now on. Meanwhile, Lingi remained completely obsessed with the mysterious pianist, humiliating Han whenever she had the chance. She insisted that Yingxia deserved a real man, someone who could afford dinner at the most expensive place in the city, not a broke guy who could barely pay for a snack. Han Sanqian listened to everything in silence and took action. He went straight to the Tower of Love, the most luxurious and exclusive restaurant in Yen, where the waiting list stretched for weeks and the prices were outrageous. For Han, reserving a single table wasn't enough. With one simple command, he shut down the entire restaurant for a private booking. While the Su clan continued spreading gossip as usual, Han was quietly setting the stage to silence them all and give Yingxia the night she had never experienced in years of marriage. Rumors spread like wildfire throughout the Su clan. The Tower of Love had been locked down. The gossip claimed that a mysterious billionaire had spent millions to reserve the entire restaurant for a marriage proposal. The women in the family boiled with envy, taking the opportunity to mock Yingxia, reminding her that her wedding anniversary fell exactly on the 22nd, and that with a burden like Han Sanqian, the most she would receive was a cheap street snack. Yingxia endured the laughter and ridicule in silence, having no idea what was about to happen. On the 22nd, Han set everything in motion. Yingxia, stunningly dressed, was escorted to the luxurious building accompanied by Lingi, who couldn't understand how they had gained entry to a place that was supposedly fully reserved. After a tense ride up 40 floors in the elevator, the doors opened to a scene straight out of a movie. In the center of the empty hall, a man sat with his back turned, playing the piano with flawless precision, filling the entire space with music. The shock was paralyzing. The moment she recognized the silhouette, Yingxia began to cry. Lingi's piano god and the owner of the $1 million reservation were the same person, Han Sanqian. Lingi nearly fainted when she realized that the man she had fallen for online was the very same poor scooter guy she had mocked so mercilessly. Han stopped playing and walked toward his wife. Yingxia, torn between tears and shock, lightly punched his chest, angry that he had lied about not knowing how to play the piano. Han gently held her hands and made a solemn promise. For the past 3 years, he had allowed the world to see her as the wife of a failure, but that time was over. From that moment forward, he guaranteed that no one would ever dare mock her again. Yingxia asked how he had endured so much poison in silence, feeling the weight of every sacrifice he had made, just to wait for the right moment to place her at the top. The entire city stopped to watch the spectacle. On the giant screen broadcasting the inside of the restaurant to every district, the image of Han Sanqian and Yingxia became the talk of the town. Han confessed that he knew the weight of every joke she had endured because of him, and that this moment was his reckoning with the past. Meanwhile, in a luxury hotel directly across the street, Yingxia's cousin, who had sworn she would be the chosen one of the mysterious billionaire, nearly shattered the window when she saw through her binoculars that the man of her dreams was the so-called family trash, standing beside the woman she hated the most. The next day, the company turned into a nest of snakes. Not knowing who the stars on the giant screen really were, the employees mocked Yingxia, asking if she was happy just watching the dinner from afar. They said the difference between her and the lucky woman from the previous night was an unbridgeable gap, and that the blame fell on the useless husband waiting for her at home. Yingxia listened to everything with a mysterious smile, without saying a single word. The game changed the moment her cousin walked into the room. Yingxia, now holding full authority, issued a direct order. The cousin was to head to the West Zone for a field inspection under the scorching sun and report everything back to her immediately. The girl exploded in rage, shouting that Yingxia had no shame giving orders after the embarrassment the family had suffered at the restaurant the night before. Yingxia didn't miss the opportunity. With cutting calmness, she apologized for being present at the dinner and suggested that if her cousin was too tired to work, she could call grandma right now and request a permanent replacement. Panic spread across the cousin's face. She knew that if the matriarch discovered she was dodging her duties, her career at the company would be over. Swallowing her own poison, the girl had no choice but to lower her head and ask through clenched teeth what exactly she needed to do to avoid being fired. Yingxia's cousin panicked and begged her not to involve grandma. Yingxia, showing no mercy, delivered the final order. The girl would have to face the blazing sun at the construction site. She reminded her cousin that she had spent months suffering in that heat, with swollen feet and total exhaustion while others laughed, so now it was her turn to feel the weight of real work. Foaming with rage, the cousin hurled curses, shouting that once she married a powerful rich man, she would make Yingxia pay for every second of humiliation. Yingxia simply smiled, knowing her cousin had no idea that the very big shot she dreamed of was sleeping in the room next door. On the night of the 23rd, Han Sanqian decided to pay a visit to one of the city's hottest nightclubs. The moment he stepped inside, he was stopped by arrogant security guards who were gossiping about the mystery dinner at the Tower of Love. When they recognized Han, the brutes immediately began their performance of insults, asking what that useless son-in-law wanted there before opening hours. They mocked the fact that trash like him was driving an Audi, swearing the car had to be stolen or rented. Han kept a cold stare, simply asking them to inform the owner, Lin Yong, that he was waiting. The guards' fun ended in a single second. Lin Yong, the owner and one of Han's most powerful allies, came running out and wrapped brother Han in an enthusiastic embrace. The employees nearly fainted when they saw their boss treating the so-called failure like royalty. While Han asked his friend to ease up on the hug, his phone vibrated. It was a message from Yingxia, a triumphant selfie with the cousin in the background, wearing a sour expression in the middle of the construction site. She added that she had already vented her anger and would prepare a special dinner for the two of them. Lin Yong, realizing the disrespect from his subordinates, exploded with fury. He ordered everyone to kneel immediately and beg forgiveness from Han Sanqian if they wanted to keep their jobs or their teeth. The tough guys, now trembling with fear, pressed their foreheads to the floor. Begging for mercy from the man they had sworn minutes earlier was a nobody. Han Sanqian wrapped up the conversation with Lin Yong, leaving a message that a major business deal was coming and needed to be closed quickly. As he walked out, the nightclub owner cast a deadly glare at his men, warning them that their reckoning would be unforgettable. On the way out, Han crossed paths with Haichao, who tried to pick a fight but was completely ignored. The blonde man fumed with rage, promising a surprise that would destroy Han's peace later that very night. When he arrived home, Han parked the second Audi in the garage, rehearsing how he would explain the new purchase to Yingxia without sounding insane. But the mood on the couch felt like a funeral. Yingxia was in tears. She revealed that the construction site in the West Zone had turned into a war zone. A group of thugs had stormed the area, beaten the workers, including the cousin who had been sent there, and blocked every route for delivering construction materials. To make matters worse, Haichao had already spread poison through the family, accusing Yingxia of diverting project funds to show off luxury cars and demanding her immediate dismissal. Han let out a quiet chuckle, thinking about the irony of being accused of stealing pocket change from the company while already owning the most expensive mansion in the city. Yingxia, nervous, thought he was mocking her desperation, but Han quickly changed his tone and assured her that he would personally handle the mess because something about it smelled like a setup. Meanwhile, in a VIP booth, Haichao was toasting with his accomplices. One of the criminals confirmed that the blockade was in place and that if the blonde man wanted to take control of the company and break Yingxia, all he had to do was follow the plan. Haichao smiled victoriously, convinced he had Han Sanqian and his wife in the palm of his hand, completely unaware that he was playing with fire by messing with the allies of the so-called useless son-in-law. Gong kept his eyes fixed on Yingxia, already visualizing his plan to force her into a private meeting. Between drinks at the nightclub, he questioned Haichao's loyalty, finding it strange that a Su family heir would conspire against his own relatives. The blonde man, trying not to look like a cheap traitor, dropped a piece of information that caught Gong's attention. He mentioned seeing the trash, Han Sanqian, laughing and socializing with the powerful Lin Yang. Gong became alert, but his desire for Yingxia spoke louder than any warning. The next day, Yingxia was a bundle of nerves, but Han Sanqian reassured her, asking her to trust him as her assistant. As soon as they arrived at the meeting location, they were surrounded by Gong's thugs, who immediately started their intimidation show. The criminals mocked Han, boasting that they could wipe out the failure with a single punch. Yingxia cut through the chaos, demanding respect and focusing on the real reason for the meeting, ending the blockade at the construction site. Gong laid his cards on the table with a cynical smile. He demanded 1 billion yuan to stop the attacks, and promised that for that price, the Su family would receive permanent protection. Yingxia, trying to stay diplomatic, handed him an envelope with the negotiation terms, but Gong didn't even bother to read it. He tore up the document and made a disgusting proposal. Since she wanted honesty, they should go upstairs to a hotel room and settle things alone. Fury took over Yingxia. She rejected the offer immediately, outraged by the criminal's audacity. Seeing that she wouldn't give in easily, Gong issued an ultimatum. If she didn't go upstairs with him, the deal was dead, and the destruction of the construction site would continue. He believed he had total control, failing to realize that the assistant standing beside Yingxia was simply waiting for the signal to turn that room into a nightmare. The tension finally snapped. One of Gong's thugs lunged forward to strike Han Sanqian, but the so-called useless son-in-law dodged with an agility that left everyone in shock. With an icy glare, Han delivered an ultimatum. Gong had one single chance to spill the truth and explain the setup if he wanted to walk out of there in one piece. The criminal laughed, confident in his numerical advantage, swearing that he was the one who decided who lived or died in that room. The tide turned in a second. Lin Yang showed up with an army of men, surrounding the place and wiping out any chance of escape. Sensing the danger, Yingxia panicked for her husband, but Han calmed her with a touch on the shoulder, telling her to wait in the car. He assured her he would handle everything and that she would be safe. Lin Yang extended a knife to Han, asking if he wanted to finish the job personally. Gong, now in total desperation, tried to bluff, claiming his backers were untouchable and that the revenge would be terrible. Han hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision, but Lin Yang took over the interrogation. After a beating that left the villain disfigured and too weak to lie, the truth finally surfaced. The mastermind behind everything was Haichao. Gong confessed that Yingxia's cousin had deliberately planned the construction blockade and the attack. The goal was to force Yingxia into getting involved with Gong, so that Haichao could use the scandal to have her expelled from the Su family for betrayal. Han returned to the car with an unreadable expression. Worried, Yingxia asked if he was hurt, and whether the blockade on the project would finally end. Han simply looked at her and confirmed that the path was clear, but inside, his blood was boiling. He already knew exactly who would be the next to fall. Han Sanqian got back into the car with a faint smile, assuring her that the nightmare at the construction site was over. Yingxia, still in shock, couldn't understand how such a heavy situation had been resolved so quickly and wanted to know who the men were that had suddenly appeared to help them. Han brushed it off, changing the subject and saying that the next day he would personally attend the report meeting with the matriarch. The next morning, the atmosphere in the Su family meeting room was pure poison. Haichao and his cousin were already there, feeding the grandmother lies. The blonde man claimed that Yingxia hadn't returned home the night before because she had been in Gong's arms, the gang leader who had blocked the construction. He said he had investigated and discovered that Yingxia had traded her own dignity in exchange for the project being released, once again tarnishing the family's name. Furious, the grandmother slammed her hand on the table and declared that if that were true, Yingxia would be banished forever. The relatives around them agreed, reminding everyone that her marriage to the trash Han Sanqian had already been humiliation enough for a lifetime. At the peak of the judgment, Yingxia walked into the room. Calmly, she apologized for the slight delay, explaining that she had been finalizing the technical paperwork required by Manager Zhang. The grandmother, with a cold stare, got straight to the point. Had the construction problem been resolved? Yingxia confirmed that it had, and that the flow of materials and work had already returned to normal. Haichao, in disbelief and trying to save his plan, interrupted the conversation. He pressured his cousin, asking what exact price she had paid to convince a thug like Gong to back down. Yingxia hesitated for a second, since the solution had involved Han Sanqian's brute force, something she still didn't know how to explain to that nest of snakes waiting for her downfall. Yingxia was at a dead end. She knew the construction had been cleared, but how could she explain the miracle without mentioning that she had been hiding in the car while her so-called useless husband handled everything with his own hands? Before she could come up with an excuse about payment, the grandmother unleashed the poison. She confronted her granddaughter about the rumors that she had sold her own body to the gang leader, Gong, in exchange for the favor. The meeting room turned into a courtroom of humiliation until the door was suddenly thrown open. Lin Yong walked in dragging a hooded man, tossing the gift at the matriarch's feet. Haichao, trying to maintain his heir's posture, started barking orders to throw the intruder out, but he was completely ignored. Lin Yong introduced himself as the savior of the day and demanded payment for the cleanup service he had provided to the Su family. The shock was total when the hood fell. It was Gong, his face badly deformed from the beating. Without hesitation, the thug spilled everything in front of the grandmother. He confessed that the true architect of the chaos was not an external enemy, but Haichao himself. The plan was dirty. Attack the construction site, injure the workers, and force a sexual scandal so that Yingxia would be banished and the family's reputation would become a joke in the city. Haichao collapsed, denying everything and swearing he had never seen that man in his life. But Gong didn't stop. He detailed how the blonde brat had hired him to destroy his own cousin out of pure jealousy. The silence in the room was replaced by shocked murmurs from the other relatives, who couldn't believe that Haichao had crossed the line of betrayal just to steal Yingxia's position. The meeting room boiled with tension after Gong's confession. The sense of betrayal was too heavy to ignore. After all, Yingxia was still blood of their blood. Faced with the scandal, Haichao lost his composure and threw himself at the grandmother's feet, swearing innocence while his father desperately begged the matriarch not to destroy him, promising to discipline his son at home. The grandmother, maintaining her cold posture, ignored the pleas. She turned to Lin Yong, thanking him for helping resolve this internal problem, and asked what the price for the service would be. With an enigmatic smile, Lin Yong replied that since she was a respectable woman, he would return to collect only when everything was 100% settled, walking away and leaving the bomb in the family's hands. In a strategic move, the grandmother passed the ball to Yingxia, asking how she would like to punish her cousin. Yingxia hesitated. She knew that if she went too hard, the grandmother might see her as cruel, so she chose to remain diplomatic and handed the decision back to the matriarch. The sentence was lenient. Haichao would be removed from the company for an indefinite period to reflect on his mistakes. As soon as they left the room, Haichao's mask of regret fell apart. He began mocking Yingxia in the hallway, laughing at the light punishment. He declared that no matter what he did, he would still be the favorite grandson, and she was nothing more than a disposable tool for business. According to him, without the contract with the real estate giant, she would probably end up in the hospital. That night, the mood in the bedroom felt like a turning point. While Han stepped out to handle some business, Yingxia reflected on their 3 years of marriage. In the beginning, her fear had been so intense that she used to sleep with a pair of scissors under her pillow to protect herself. Over time, Han's respectful behavior made her lower her guard, but the weapon had stayed there out of habit. Staring at the ceiling, it became crystal clear that the old woman's favoritism was an unbreakable barrier and that her scumbag cousin still felt untouchable. Grandma's injustice left Yingxia boiling. In the car, she vented to Han Sanqian, outraged at being treated like she was nothing, while the cousin who betrayed the family walked away almost untouched. Han listened in silence, but inside, his fury kept rising. He decided that the matriarch would one day feel the weight of every humiliation forced upon his wife. Yingxia shifted the focus and confronted Han about Lin Yong's miraculous appearance. With no way out, he made up a story, saying he had shelled out 100,000 yuan to hire the big shot's services. She nearly had a heart attack, remembering that amount was equal to an entire year of her salary. Han simply gave an awkward smile, thinking that if she ever saw the real balance on his card, she wouldn't even have the right to breathe the same air as him in that room. Yingxia stormed into the car, fuming with rage. When Han Sanqian asked whether Grandma had finally given her the recognition she deserved, the answer came out as a bitter outburst. She explained that even with living proof of Haichao's betrayal, Grandma had simply sent him home to rest. To Yingxia, she finally decided that it was time to put the scissors away for good. Meanwhile, in a dark office, Han Sanqian and Lin Yong walked in without knocking. The owner of the place, an arrogant man named Shang Bin, trembled at the sight of Lin Yong but scoffed when he heard Han's name. He couldn't believe that the famous trash son-in-law of the Su family had shown up to negotiate. Han got straight to the point. He wanted Mo Yang's freedom since he was being held by Shang Bin. The villain laughed, asking what a failure could possibly offer to convince him. Shang Bin made it clear he had zero respect for the Su family and that money alone wouldn't be enough to change his mind. He underestimated Han Sanqian, thinking he was dealing with nothing more than one of Lin Yong's subordinates, never imagining he was facing the man who truly pulled the strings in the city. Han Sanqian's patience with arrogant big shots had limits. Inside Shang Bin's office, the tension spiked when the villain ordered his goons to finish off the useless son-in-law. He thought Han would be an easy target, but in the blink of an eye, the situation flipped. Han took down every brute with brutal efficiency. Shang Bin, now trembling and cornered, was lifted by the throat. Under the pressure of a precise punch and Han's icy stare, he had no choice but to release Mo Yang. Freedom came at a high price. As they walked out, they realized they were surrounded by a fleet of enemy cars. While the trap tightened outside, back at home, Yingxia couldn't sleep. The clock showed 11 p.m., and jealousy began to creep in. She wondered whether Han might be with another woman. When he finally walked through the door, she pretended to be fast asleep, too stubborn to admit how worried she had been. The next day brought a different kind of headache. Yingxia's uncles arrived from their trip. At the airport, the shock was immediate when they spotted the shiny Audi A8. Greedy as ever, they instantly concluded that Yingxia must be skimming money from the new project to fund luxury purchases. The spoiled son of the couple didn't even wait for introductions. He shoved Han aside and grabbed the keys, shouting that a loser had no business driving a machine like that. Han didn't bother arguing. He simply said he was going to pick up his wife from work and that they could figure out how to get to the apartment on their own. The aunt, wearing a fake smile dripping with venom, said that was no problem. But the moment Han walked away, she promised her husband that that piece of trash would pay dearly for his boldness. When they arrived at the apartment door, Zhang Lan, Yingxia's mother, rushed out to welcome her brother, completely unaware that her sister-in-law was already plotting a plan to humiliate her family and grab whatever she could. The relative's arrival turned into a full display of arrogance. As soon as Han Sanqian stepped away, the aunt unleashed all her venom on Han's mother-in-law, Zhang Lan, questioning how she could dare let a servant drive a car like that. The spoiled cousin joined in, mocking that Han's proper place was riding an old scooter, not driving an Audi. The tension escalated so badly that Jiang Lan, consumed by fury and embarrassment, swore that Han would pay dearly the moment he set foot back home. While waiting for Yingxia to leave the office, Han was surrounded by a group of thugs eager to test his patience. They laughed, calling him a disgrace to men and questioning how a woman as beautiful as Yingxia could end up with trash. Han's patience ran out in seconds. He sent the group packing with a few precise blows, leaving them limping away before things could get worse. When Yingxia finally showed up, she immediately noticed a dent on the front of the car. Han didn't hesitate. He explained that her cousin had tried to seize the wheel by force at the airport and ended up crashing the vehicle. The scene when they arrived home looked like a battlefield. The entire family was outside, and Jiang Lan charged forward like a wild animal, snatching the key from Han's hand. Shouting at the top of her lungs, she forbade her son-in-law from touching the car again, claiming that fixing an Audi would cost a fortune he could never afford. Inside the house, the yelling continued. Her mother-in-law accused Han of crashing the car out of pure incompetence, ignoring every explanation. Yingxia felt the full weight of the injustice. She tried to speak up and say that the car actually belonged to Han, but when she glanced toward the corner of the room and saw the scheming smiles of her uncles and cousin, she realized the trap. Her mother, blinded by anger, delivered the ultimatum. If Yingxia defended her husband one more time, she would personally file for divorce that very night. Yingxia's cousin didn't miss the chance to rub salt in the wound, doubling down on the lie that Han Sanqian was a dangerous driver and that she should never trust her own life to him on the road. The aunt, with razor-sharp cynicism, added that now that Yingxia was swimming in money, a dent in the Audi was nothing. The real crime was letting a nobody sit behind the wheel. Yingxia, burning with indignation, tried to speak, but her voice got stuck in her throat from sheer rage. Before she could react, her mother yanked her back roughly, declaring that from that moment on, Han was forbidden from picking her up at work. To make the humiliation even worse, Zhang Lan ordered her daughter to invite her uncle to dinner that night, making it crystal clear that Han was not welcome. Sensing his wife's discomfort, Han Sang-kyan stayed calm and made up an excuse, saying he already had important commitments and suggesting that she go with her relatives to avoid more arguments. The uncle, thinking he had won by wearing him down, mocked Han's strategic exit, saying he was clever for coming up with a stupid excuse to avoid embarrassing himself at the party. Meanwhile, the cousin celebrated his own mother's audacity, proud that she had managed to blame Han for a crash he himself had caused, without the coward saying a single word to defend himself. The aunt simply advised her son to be careful, since now he wouldn't have anyone else to blame if he messed up on the road again. On the way to the restaurant, the mask of loving relatives completely fell off. Believing that Yingxia's family had bought 2 Audis and was swimming in money, the uncle and aunt plotted a scheme. They would ask for 200 yuan on loan during dinner. The plan was dirty. They had already decided they would never pay the money back, justifying it by saying that since Jianglan was rich and he was the older brother, she had an obligation to support them without asking for anything in return. With their script of malice ready, they arrived at the banquet, where the old man began staging a performance of financial hardship to deliver the final blow. The dinner had barely started when Yingxia's uncle cast the bait, acting out a financial crisis to set up his move. When Jianglan asked how much he needed, he held up 2 fingers. She, thinking it was a symbolic amount of 2,000 won, almost agreed, but the man cut her off with a disgusting smirk. 2,000 wouldn't even cover coffee. What he wanted was 200,000. The shock was immediate. Yingxia's parents nearly choked, but the opportunistic relatives didn't let up. They argued that for someone who had 2 luxury cars in the garage worth millions, 200,000 was pocket change. The aunt even played the emotional card, reminding Jianglan that in the past they had defended her honor when people claimed she had married a fake rich man, and that now it was time for her to repay the favor. Pressured by her ego and her desire to keep up appearances, Jianglan eventually gave in, leaving Yingxia and her father in total panic. The conversation, however, was suddenly interrupted by a loud crash. Yingxia's cousin, who had stepped out to use the bathroom, was thrown back into the dining hall, covered in blood. His mother ran over in desperation, screaming at a group of thugs who came in right behind him. The leader of the group got straight to the point. The kid had harassed his wife, and that was why he got what he deserved. Instead of apologizing, Yingxia's aunt reacted with unbelievable arrogance. She pointed her finger at the giant's wife and blamed her for the assault, saying that the way she dressed was an invitation for her innocent son to make a mistake. The brute didn't tolerate the insult. In one swift motion, he slapped the aunt hard across the face, making Yingxia's uncle shrink back in fear, too scared to defend his own wife. The attacker warned that although he was a fair man, he would not tolerate disrespect, and that the price of that humiliation had just gone up. The tension in the restaurant escalated to another level. The gang leader refused any apologies. He demanded a fortune in cash for the disrespect shown to his wife, or Yingxia's cousin's life as payment. In total panic, the cowardly kid tried to hand over the key to the Audi A8 to the giant, begging them to take the car and leave him alone. Han's mother-in-law, Jianglan, jumped up from her chair in fury. She made it clear that the car belonged to her and that her nephew should solve his own problems without dragging the family's property into it. The big man, ignoring the vehicle, turned his malicious gaze toward Yingxia, saying that he already had plenty of money and that now his interest was something else. Yingxia shouted for him to stay back, but the man cornered her, claiming that no woman ever escaped him. In a rare moment of courage, Jianglan tried to intervene with a slap, yelling that the name of the Su family should be respected. The giant simply laughed, striking back and mocking that the Su family's prestige meant nothing on the streets. Even cornered, Yingxia issued one final warning. If he insisted on making that mistake, the regret would be bitter. The thug, bored, assigned 2 henchmen to guard the door, forbidding anyone from leaving while he went to receive other guests, promising to return later to pick up Yingxia. Desperation took over the table. Jiang Lan suggested calling the family matriarch, but Yingxia's father was realistic. Grandma would never risk herself against criminals of that caliber for them. While her mother cursed her husband for his passivity, Yingxia tried to stay calm, knowing that the only person capable of turning that situation around was not sitting at that table, but was probably already on his way. Grandma Su was nothing more than a paper tiger. Her authority died at the mansion gates. Yingxia spoke honestly to her parents. The matriarch would never have the courage to face real criminals. When her father asked who was left, she spoke the name no one expected, Han Sang-kyan. Jianglan nearly lost her mind, shouting that her daughter had gone crazy for trusting a useless man. The aggressive cousin even tried to make a joke, but Yingxia lost her patience, telling him to shut up and reminding him that it was his stupidity that had put them in the crosshairs. On the other side of the city, Han Sanqian was enjoying a cup of instant noodles when his phone rang. Yingxia's voice was tense as she asked for help. Without asking for details, he dropped everything and said he would arrive within minutes. Yingxia let out her first sigh of relief that night, ignoring her mother, who kept insisting that she call grandma. For the first time, the young woman faced Jianglan directly and spoke with certainty. She was betting her life on Han because he was the only one who had never let her down. In the main hall, the atmosphere was festive for the criminals. The brute was flattering a man known as Brother Wong, claiming that he was the new ruler of the city and that even powerful tycoons couldn't compare to him. Wong, however, was distracted, still dwelling on the scolding he had received from Han Sanqian the last time because of his incompetence. He tried to look important, but the fear of disappointing the true master continued to haunt him. The flattery was cut short by a loud bang that made the glasses tremble. Without asking permission, and with a look that promised chaos, Han Sanqian kicked the main door open, stepping into the place as if he owned it. Silence fell over the restaurant. The useless son-in-law had arrived to settle the score. The door to the VIP room nearly flew off its hinges. When Wong saw who had barged in, the color drained from his face. He rushed toward Han Sanqian, stuttering and calling him brother, with a respect that bordered on fear. The brute, not understanding a thing, still tried to mock him, asking if Wong was really showing respect to that guy. The answer came in the form of a shout. Wong ordered the fat man to shut his mouth before something worse happened. Han Sanqian, with an icy stare, pointed at the attacker and demanded to know if Wong was part of that mess. Trembling, Wong swore it was just a casual business meeting. That was when Han dropped the bomb. The fat man's business had been harassing his wife. Wong's world collapsed. Without hesitation, he lunged at his own ally with blind fury, asking if the idiot had shit for brains to lay a hand on Han Sanqian's woman. While Wong's guards beat the fat man senseless, Han simply turned his back and left the command of the cleanup in his subordinate's hands. In the hall where the family was being held, the mood was pure cynicism. Han's mother-in-law was screaming at the top of her lungs, saying the son-in-law was a coward who was probably hiding under a bed right now, since there wasn't even a taxi available for him to get there. The aggressive cousin, groaning in pain between breaths, shouted that Yingxia was the only idiot who believed in that loser. The aunt, desperate, begged Jianglan to call grandma, claiming her son needed a hospital immediately. The shouting was interrupted by the sound of the door opening. Everyone shrank back, expecting the thugs to return, but the one who stepped through the doorway was Han Sanqian, wearing a calm smile. He walked up to Yingxia and said, in the calmest voice possible, that it was time for them to go home. The cousin, still not realizing the danger had been neutralized, started yelling that Han was a fool for coming there, since the guards outside would never let them leave alive. Han didn't even bother to respond. He simply took his wife's hand, ready to walk over anyone who dared to stand in his way. Han Sanqian ignored the cousin's screams and kept moving forward, clearing the path for Yingxia. As they passed through the hallway of VIP rooms, the scene was surreal. The massive brute and his entire crew were on their knees, their foreheads pressed against the floor, trembling like leaves. Yingxia froze in place, shocked, and asked what the hell had happened there. With that familiar, I don't know anything attitude that had become his trademark, Han gave a faint smile and suggested that maybe the floor had been too slippery and everyone had slipped at the same time. The gang leader, noticing Han's deadly glare, quickly confirmed it, stuttering that the floor was dangerous and that they had simply fallen by accident. Yingxia raised an eyebrow, clearly not believing a single word, but decided not to push further. Deep down, she knew Han had moved the world for her that night, and that was what truly mattered. The relief of freedom didn't last long. The moment they stepped into the house, the chaos began. Yingxia's father, finally losing his patience, confronted Jianglan for promising 200,000 wen to her scammer brother without having a single cent in her pocket. The mother-in-law, without a hint of remorse, fired back that her daughter worked at a huge company and that diverting that amount would be easy. When her husband accused her of putting Yingxia's safety at risk for money, Jianglan resorted to theatrics. She threw herself onto the floor, kicking and screaming like a spoiled child. Between screams and fake sobs, she claimed her life was miserable for having married a failure, and that everything she did was to maintain the family's reputation in front of jealous relatives. Yingxia, exhausted and with her eyes burning from so much anger, finally snapped. To shut her mother up and end the spectacle, she shouted that she would find a way to get the money. When she entered the bedroom, weighed down by exhaustion, she found Han Sanqian waiting for her. With a calm voice that contrasted with the chaos in the living room, he asked if all that drama was just because of the debt to her uncle. Inside the bedroom, silence finally took over, but Yingxia's face was soaked with tears. Without saying a word, she collapsed into Han Sanqian's arms, begging for help. Han held her gently and asked if all that trouble was really about the 200,000 her uncle wanted. Yingxia confirmed, sobbing, and swore on her honor that she would sign a loan receipt and pay back every cent as soon as she could. Han couldn't hold back a small chuckle, which made the girl even more nervous. She insisted she was serious about paying him back, but he silenced her with a tight embrace. Han explained that what was his also belonged to her, and that it didn't matter whether the amount was 200,000 or 2 million. If it was to solve her problems, he would pay without blinking. With a kiss on her forehead, he joked that the word loan didn't exist in their vocabulary. Yingxia, a little more encouraged but still stubborn, gently pushed him away and ran to grab paper and pen, intrigued by how naturally her husband talked about millions. When she questioned him about the real balance in his account, Han simply gave an enigmatic smile, saying he had a little more than the 2 million he had mentioned. The next morning, Han Sanqian went to the bank, but ran straight into the bureaucracy and arrogance of a teller. The employee, wearing an air of superiority, mocked his request for an immediate withdrawal of 200,000, demanding prior notice. She looked at Han's special card with contempt, stating that in all her years at the bank, she had never seen anything like it and that he had no privileges there. Han kept his composure and warned that if the bank owner saw him, he would personally count the bills. The woman lost her patience, shouting that her counter was not a stage for performances and threatening to call security if he didn't step aside. The commotion was only interrupted when the branch manager appeared, drawn by the noise, wanting to understand why an employee was losing control with a client who, although he looked simple, carried in his pocket the key to that institution's vault. The chaos at the bank escalated quickly. The employee, pointing her finger aggressively, explained to the manager that Han Sanqian was making a scene over the prior notice required to withdraw the 200,000. The manager, trying to keep her composure, started with the same bureaucratic speech. But everything changed when Han slid the card across the counter. The moment her eyes landed on it, the woman nearly stumbled over her own feet. Her rigid posture turned into a deep bow and desperate apologies. The VIP treatment was immediate. The withdrawal that had been impossible suddenly became top priority, and Han was escorted to a private room while the manager ordered the arrogant employee to humbly apologize if she didn't want to be fired on the spot. In the lobby, the other customers watched everything with their mouths open, commenting on how the snobby teller had finally met someone powerful enough to put her in her place. On the way out, the manager and her staff made a point of walking Han all the way to his car, wearing wide smiles and promising flawless service in the future. The boss remained standing there, watching Han drive away, frustrated that she hadn't managed to get even a single look of interest from the young billionaire. The moment she went back inside, the hammer dropped. The employee was suspended indefinitely. The explanation was blunt and simple. Anyone who couldn't recognize the exclusive card reserved for clients with more than 10 billion in their account had no business working in that bank. Later, Han arrived home with the package of cash in his hands. The moment Jianglan saw the money, she lunged forward like a starving rat, snatching the bag from her son-in-law without the slightest sign of gratitude. She didn't even care where the money had come from. Her only concern was making sure her scammer brother received his share to maintain the image of a rich family in front of their relatives. Han Sanqian's mother-in-law barely waited for him to step through the door before making her move. Like a rat eyeing a piece of cheese, she ripped the briefcase of cash from his hands, complaining about the delay without showing a single ounce of appreciation. The uncle and aunt, desperate to run off with the loot, invented an urgent excuse and demanded that Han drive them immediately, while Yingxia's father burned with anger at seeing the relatives leave without even saying a thank you for the 200,000. Han kept the expressionless face of someone who already had all the pieces on the board. On the way to the bus station, the spectacle of greed continued in the back seat. The aunt and the cousin nearly started fighting over who got to hold the briefcase. When Han glanced at them through the rearview mirror, the spoiled brat snarled, asking if the trash was impressed, since he had probably never seen that much money in his life. Han simply agreed with an enigmatic smile, innocently commenting that public transportation had become dangerous lately and that they could get robbed at any moment. The aunt almost exploded, accusing her son-in-law of jinxing their trip. The moment he dropped them off, Han pulled out his phone and gave the order to Wang. The plan was in motion. Meanwhile, inside the bus, The relatives complained about the smell and the crowd, clutching the cash tightly. In the middle of the ride, a clumsy passenger stumbled onto the ant, causing a loud commotion. Another man showed up to help the guy back to his feet, and the confusion quickly faded. The shock came kilometers later. When they opened the bag to check their treasure, they found nothing but emptiness. The money had vanished. Wang called Han to confirm that the package was already in his hands and would be returned to the boss the next day. Han Sanqian was not a charity bank. Anyone who tried to extort his family would learn that his money might come easily, but it left with interest paid in humiliation. At the end of the day, Han showed up at Yingxia's workplace looking the same as always. To his surprise, she suggested going out for dinner. When he asked the reason for the sudden celebration, she looked straight at him, wanting to thank him for being the only pillar holding that chaotic family together without ever asking for anything in return. Yingxia decided to repay the loan of 200,000 in style, reserving a private room at the trendy restaurant in the UFO building. The problem started at the reception. Even with a reservation for 5:30 p.m., the mustached receptionist with a hostile expression blocked their entry at 5:20 p.m., claiming the place was full. With unbearable sarcasm, he told the couple to wait in the back or get lost, saying he had no patience for people like them. Yingxia refused to swallow the insult and stood her ground, demanding that the reservation be honored. In response, the man snapped his fingers and called security to throw them out by force. Han Sanqian stepped forward, shielding his wife, and asked if the employee really thought they were the problem there. The mustached man confirmed rudely, ordering the attack. What followed was a shock for Yingxia. She stood frozen as her husband, the man everyone called useless, dodged a punch and drove a brutal elbow straight into the first guard's stomach. When the other two rushed him together, Han dispatched them with a single motion, tossing them aside as if they were made of paper. The receptionist, now stuttering in fear, backed away while Han demanded to see the general manager. The owner of the establishment appeared right on cue, drawn by the noise. The mustached man rushed to play the victim, shouting that the couple had stormed the place and knocked out the security team for no reason. The boss, however, ignored the employees' ranting and stood frozen, shifting his gaze between the three guards lying on the floor and Han Sanqian's unshakable stance. Realizing that this ordinary customer was actually someone he should never have allowed his employee to insult. The restaurant owner, Lei Xuan, instead of apologizing, chose arrogance. He admitted that Han Sanqian had talent and even offered him a security job paying 30,000 a month, thinking he was doing him a favor. Han didn't even blink and fired back in the same tone, demanding that the owner himself kneel if he wanted forgiveness for insulting his wife. Yingxia, watching her husband confront danger like a true alpha, felt a mix of pride and fear, trying to pull him away before things got worse. Han simply reassured her, guaranteeing that no one would lay a hand on her while he was there. Furious at being ignored, Lei Xuan called in his secret weapon, Ahu, a former Special Forces fighting champion and a true giant. The brute stepped forward, cracking his knuckles, mocking Han's courage, and promising to show him what a real iron fist looked like. Lei Xuan watched confidently, certain he was about to see the Su family's son-in-law crushed on the restaurant floor, but the fight lasted only a heartbeat. Ah Hu charged with everything he had, throwing a punch that could have knocked down a wall, but Han Sanqian moved like a shadow. He dodged flawlessly and delivered an explosive knee straight to the giant's jaw. The Special Forces champion collapsed like a sack of sand, dropping unconscious right at Lei Xuan's feet. The smile vanished instantly from the UFO owner's face, replaced by absolute terror as he realized his invincible bodyguard had been humiliated with a single move.